Back in 1963, a gang of criminals pulled off a heist that was so bold, so meticulously planned that it's still called the crime of the century. Today, we're going to break down the legendary story of the Great Train Robbery.
It sounds like a riddle, right? Almost impossible. But that simple question is the key to a master plan that let a gang walk away with millions, all without firing a single shot. So how'd they do it?
All right, let's set the scene. It's deep in the night, August 8, 1963. A Royal Mail train is hurtling down the tracks, making its way from Glasgow to London.
So put yourself in the driver's seat. You're Jack Mills. You know this route like the back of your hand. And then, out of the darkness, you see it. A red light. But a red light should not be here. It makes absolutely no sense. So you do the only thing you can do. You slam on the brakes, bringing this huge train to a screeching halt in the middle of nowhere.
Now, that red light, it wasn't a glitch. It was the opening move in an incredibly detailed operation. Let's rewind a bit and take a look at the blueprint for what was about to become the crime of the century.
So, who was calling the shots? The mastermind was a guy named Bruce Reynolds, and he put together a kind of criminal all-star team, uniting two separate gangs for this one job. Their target was the HVP carriage, the one with all the cash. But here's the kicker. They had an insider at Royal Mail, and they had one very, very strict rule. Absolutely no guns.
And this is where that insider info becomes just crucial. The first tip was a total game changer. See, the usual high-security HVP carriage, the one with all the bells and whistles and alarms, it was in the shop for repairs. So that night, the train was using an old spare carriage with basically zero modern security, a sitting duck.
As if that wasn't good enough, the insider dropped a second bombshell. Because of a recent bank holiday, the train wasn't carrying its usual load of around 300,000 pounds. No, tonight, it was carrying almost 3 million pounds. For that time, that was an absolutely staggering amount of money. This wasn't just a big score, it was the score of a lifetime, and the gang knew it.
With a solid plan and the stakes higher than they could have ever imagined, the gang got into position. It was go time.
Okay, let's run through the timeline. The whole thing was lightning fast. At 3 a.m. on the dot, they rig the signal, the glove goes over the green light, and the battery powers the red one. Just 3 minutes later, the train stops, and the crew is ambushed. By about 3:15, they've unhooked the engine and the money carriage and are moving them a kilometer down the line to a bridge. And by 3:40, they're gone, along with 120 bags filled with cash. A stunningly efficient job.
But, even the best plans hit a snag. The gang had their own getaway driver, a retired train engineer, ready to move the engine. The only problem? He'd never seen an engine this modern before. He was totally stumped by the controls, and all the while, the clock is just ticking away.
Time was running out, so they had to improvise, and fast. They went back to the original driver, Jack Mills, who they'd already attacked. They got the injured man back on his feet and forced him into the cab to drive his own train to their pre-planned getaway spot. It was brutal, but it worked.
The heist itself was a success. They had the money, and they were all set to disappear. But right at the very end, one of the robbers made a single, catastrophic mistake. As they were leaving, with the postal staff tied up and terrified, one of the gang members turned and gave them that warning. It was just meant to buy them a little extra time. But instead, it gave the police the biggest clue they could have asked for.
Think about it. That one little detail was enough to unravel the whole thing. The police did the math right away. A 30-minute head start means the gang's hideout has to be within a 50-kilometer radius of the crime scene. Suddenly, a massive countrywide search became laser-focused on a very small area. Meanwhile, at a rented farm, the gang is celebrating. They're counting the money, listening to police scanners, but their party comes to a crashing halt when they hear the announcer mention that 50-kilometer search radius. The panic sets in. They realize the cops are closing in way, way faster than they thought. Their plan to lay low for a few days? Totally shot. They had to get out of there, now.
In their frantic rush to get away from the farmhouse, they tried to wipe the place clean, to get rid of every last shred of evidence. But they missed one tiny, seemingly harmless detail.
So here's how it all went down for them. First, a local neighbor gets suspicious and calls the police about all the strange activity at the farm. The police show up and raid the place, finding it empty, but not before the gang has wiped down every surface. Almost every surface, that is.
And this is it, the single clue that blew the case wide open.
was a Monopoly board. You see, while they were celebrating, the gang had played a game. But instead of using the fake paper money, they used the actual cash they had just stolen. And their fingerprints were all over the board, the dice, the little game pieces. Since most of them already had criminal records, it was just a matter of time before the police got a match.
That Monopoly board was the breakthrough. From there, the dominoes fell fast. Eventually, 14 of the 16 gang members were caught and arrested. But 2 of them just vanished into thin air. And one of those 2 was the high-level Royal Mail insider who made the whole thing possible in the first place. To this day, nobody knows who they were.
So the robbery was over, most of the bad guys were caught. But the story's impact, its legacy, would last for decades to come.
The sentences were incredibly harsh, 30 years in prison for most of them. The bridge where they unloaded the cash is still known today as Train Robbery's Bridge. But the real tragedy here was the driver, Jack Mills. He was so traumatized by the attack that he never drove a train again. He died just 7 years later. And as for the mysterious informant, their identity is still one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in criminal history.
So that leaves us with one final question to think about. Was this a truly masterful plan that was just undone by a silly slip of the tongue and a forgotten board game? Or, when the stakes are this high, is a simple human error just bound to happen, making the whole idea of a perfect crime nothing more than a fantasy?